Yo, yo, yo.
It's time for the nitty-gritty. Conversations get real live. It's time for the nitty-gritty. The revolution's not televised. It's time for the nitty-gritty.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Jay DeCosta, one half of the Nitty Gritty Show. We are continuing our conversation that we have been having around the government and how it works. I know this may seem elementary to some people watching, but it is very necessary. We have a very important election coming up because guess what? All elections are important, and all elections are the election for your life because the powers that these various offices hold are very important and they can change the way you live. And as we break down, as we break down the judicial branch and how they operate within our government, you'll see that it is very important. And when you understand, well, what does the judicial branch have to do with president or my senator? Has a lot to do with it, or even your congressman. This stuff is all intertwined. We're going to break that down tonight to continue this conversation. So I hope this has been an amazing learning vehicle for those who have been tuning in because it is important. It is very important. And we need to take it seriously. So before we go there, though, I like to cover a little current news. So, excuse me, guys. Let me wet my tongue a little bit. Here we go. All right. So, let's cover a few things. So I was just actually on the phone with my eldest daughter, Amira DeCosta. Shout out to Amira. She's over there at APSU. People! So anyways, they have a racist professor there on campus, Logan Smith. On social medias, he goes by Levi Smith. On one of his accounts, he had about 90,000 followers. This jerk is a professor and he's made some pretty racist comments. He's called black people monkeys and other things. There's been a protest at the school to get him removed from the school. Austin P, I think you guys should remove that guy from your campus. Also, he was a member of the Charlottesville protest, and that on the right side of history, may I add. So, and keep in mind, people died at that protest. So, yeah, I think he needs to be moved off. I figure I'll throw that little PSA out there for my daughter. She's definitely a pro-black individual, future psychiatrist. Very proud of her and everything that she's attempting to do in her life. So, shout out to her. I wanted to add a little color to her protest. She was a part of that too. Very proud of her, like walking under daddy's footsteps in a way. I definitely did a fair share of protesting in my younger years and to this day. So shout out to that. Let's get that joker out of there. Also, let's talk about Diddy, right? So, and I'm not gonna make this big long thing about Diddy. There's plenty of Diddy coverage. I will say this though, as far as like how these things work. The reason why the Diddy thing should be a cautionary tale to all, because your lifestyle can get you in trouble. Don't let your good be evil spoken of. I just want to say that again. Don't let your good be evil spoken of. And the truth of the matter is, these freak offs, as they've said publicly through the FBI and others, this all could have been avoided if he just had a wife that he wanted to be faithful to, right? Black men, men in general, a lot of men fall because of chasing that thing, that thing, that thing, that thing. And you can save yourself a lot of heartache and pain if you could just find someone you love, someone you're willing to attach yourself to, be faithful. And a lot of these pitfalls you wouldn't have to worry about, straight up. But, when you're living the bachelor lifestyle, and I can only imagine being a celebrity and you get this woman, that woman, this woman, that woman, and it just all becomes just part of the thing. I think what happens with some folks, maybe some things become a little mundane. They just get used to it, and it's not enough. And as a result, they find themselves in a predicament where they have to do all these different things just to enjoy something that was really meant for you and really just one other person to share. So it's unfortunate what he's going through. I've admired Diddy for his business acumen and how he's been a mover and shaker in an industry. now you got to wonder. Now everything is cast to come to question. Like, well, did he make it that far because of this and that? It's just a shame because he's donated all kind of money to Howard University. He's been a force in trying to push blackness and excellence. He even supported President Obama. Now everything he's touched, unlike King Midas, is not turning to gold; it's turning to muck. And this is why we have to be so careful about our reputations. The 48 Laws of Power, they talk about reputation. They say guard it at all costs. Now, I guess he thought he was doing that by blackmailing people, having videotapes. That's not what they mean. It's more so about live a life that people can't hold things over your head. Like James Earl Jones. James Earl Jones lived to be 93 years old, scandal free, read the New Testament. Um, his voice was used for that. He's the voice of Mufasa. He's the voice of Darth Vader. You never heard anything bad associated with James Earl Jones, right? He's lived a life that one could be proud of at 93 years old, and he could be celebrated by all that were touched by his life. But we've seen countless men destroy their whole legacies and all their talents just be forsaken because they had some weird thing about them that they couldn't control, and it takes control of their life and everything that they've touched. And it's really sad. So yeah, I can make all kind of jokes like 99 bottles of lube in the wall, 999 bottles of lube, pass them down, they all fall down, whatever. Like, but we're not gonna do all that. It's one of those things where it's not something to laugh at with Diddy. Let it be a cautionary tale to young men out there about how to conduct yourself, how not to put yourself in bad situations. I think that's what we need to learn from that. And then also understanding, because we're going to be talking about judicial powers tonight. One of the key things they're using to get Diddy, possibly, allegedly, and everything he's done, is that they're saying it's a RICO. And if you guys don't know how RICO works, I'm just going to share it real quick. So basically, a RICO was designed to get mafia bosses because you couldn't tie a mafia boss to a crime, like saying like, yeah, he actually shot so and so, or because they would get some underling, some like a soldier to do that. A boss is not going to kill anybody; they're insulated. So then, if you do a RICO and you say it's a conspiracy that you leave a criminal enterprise or conspiracy, then all the little crimes or crimes done by the underlings within your criminal enterprise, we can now tie back to you at the top, right? So what happens is Diddy could have done something as simple as, yeah, by any means necessary, we need to have this crazy freak off tonight, right? So he tells his mans, yo, get me some baddies. I need shorties up in here ready to put baby oil and lube all over themselves. So let's say he gets someone, but little to his understanding, the people he have employed are doing it against their will because maybe those particular women are being sex trafficked. So then they come to the party. Now they're at the freak off. So you have sex trafficked women who don't want to perform these sexual acts because it's not consented. Because there's nothing illegal about having a freak off. What is illegal is bringing people there against their will and holding them there. Then you find guns with scratched off serial numbers, and now one can say, yeah, they had guards there saying if I left, they were willing to kill me. So now you have that. And maybe that was a guard acting on his own, but somebody can say, hey, Diddy said we got to keep this under wraps. So I'm gonna take this gun, I'm gonna use it to threaten people to keep them there. And on the other end, what can happen is maybe somebody who works under him has videotapes. And they're like, hey, if you don't do this, I'll put videotapes and I share it with your family. I'll share it on social media. I'll ruin you. You'll never get another job in this town ever. So now Diddy could be innocent at the top. He could have been like, hey, look, y'all, I just want to have a freak off again. We did that joint last year. It was a good time. Yeah, we want to do some freaky stuff. We trying to be Hugh Hefner Playboy Mansion over here. Right? But when you are in a situation where you don't, maybe you're not aware of all the means of how these folks got here, but because you're at the top, one can say that it's a criminal enterprise and lives are being hurt and people are being damaged and forced to do something that they don't want to do. And now Diddy has a RICO. Same thing should work with a certain person running for president, Donald J. Trump, because you said something that led underlings, right, to do something that they felt like you suggested. So, prime example, I can say, oh, I really wish somebody would take so and so out. And if I have that much power and I have that much influence off my voice, someone may go kill someone because I made the comment, man, we should really go kill so and so. And if it happens, one can then now tie me to conspiracy that falls under me. So what's stopping the law to attack Donald J. Trump? And because it's not attacking, it's just, hey, you guys led a rebellion against my country that I fought for on January 6th. You attacked public government officials, right? You had every mean and intent to do them serious harm, right? JD Vance, because of his comments that are not true about Haitian immigrants who are protected on asylum in Springfield, Ohio, has led to many of them being harassed, bomb threats, and all kind of dysfunction in Springfield, to where the Republican mayor who is there does not want Donald Trump to visit Springfield, Ohio. He's like, you know what, stay away from my town. I don't want you to cause any more uproar. So if we had that evidence on public media for display, where's Donald Trump's and JD Vance's RICO? I mean, obviously we know Donald Trump has one. He needs to be convicted. If they convict Diddy, surely for a freak off, surely we can have Donald Trump convicted when you attack a federal government building of our country. Tis of thee. Surely he should be able to get in trouble. So since we're talking judicial, let's jump into it. Hopefully I won't be before you guys long. I'll try not to get so tongue twisted. I have a lot of stuff I'm going to be actually reading from. If you want to know where I'm getting my information from tonight, you can go to whitehouse.gov. It will be in the description. You click on the judicial branch, and everything I'm going to talk about, it's going to be right there. And you can find out that, hey, this is not Juan just making this stuff up. This is not Juan's personal opinion. This is actually kind of factual. And then you can go over there. So everything I have, everything I'm pulling this from is from that website. Okay? And you go check that out. Matter of fact, I'll share my screen real quick. This is it right here. So right here at the top, right? I have my own separate notes because this is a lot just to read that verbatim. But yeah, judicial branch. You go to Whitehouse .gov there. Yep. Everything you need to see. And they'll break down all of that stuff and everything in Article 3 of the Constitution, referring to that. You got it. It's right there for you. Okay? I don't pull this stuff out my behind. It's always factual, actual, and I like to give you the source. It's not my opinion. These are just the facts. If you don't like it, I don't know what to tell you. All right? So, there is a process to how our judicial branch works, and there are various facets of our judicial branch, right? We have the Supreme Court, we have the federal courts, we have the federal district courts, specialized federal courts, we have state courts, administrative courts, we have magistrate judges, and a few things, right? So let's start from the top and we'll work our way down to get a little granular, right? Yeah, Brent. Shout out to my man Brent out here. I see you, brother. Drop a bomb for you. Yes, sir, right there. So let's get down to some of these powers, right? So let's talk about how do we get the Supreme Court justices? Let's start with those 9 people up there, right? The process of selecting the U.S. Supreme Court justices involves several key steps. And while there are no formal qualifications outlined in the U.S. Constitution, let me say that one more time. And while there are no formal qualifications outlined in the U.S. Constitution, certain norms have developed over time. Here's how it works. Presidential nomination, number 1, first step. This is why the president matters. When there is a vacancy on the Supreme Court due to retirement, death, or some other reason, the President of the United States, POTUS, nominates a candidate for the position. The selection criteria. The president often considers several factors when choosing a nominee, including judicial experience. So you don't necessarily have to have it, but it would help. And these are typically people serving on the federal appeals court or state Supreme Courts, right? Legal expertise as a law professor or a practicing attorney. Their ideology and judicial philosophy aligning with the president's political and legal viewpoints. So we saw with Trump when he selected his 3 Supreme Court justices, he wanted to get people who are more conservative because he was hoping to overturn Roe v. Wade. right? Age, justices are often relatively young to ensure a long tenure because justices, Supreme Court justices, they have a life term or a lifelong appointment, unless they say, "Hey, I can't do this anymore," or they die in office, or they get in some kind of trouble. We'll talk about that more. And then diversity, including considerations of gender, race, and background, i.e., Ketanji Brown Jackson, right, or Thurgood Marshall, or even Clarence Thomas, who was brought on by a Republican uh, president, but they were like, "Hey, he's black. His ideals don't align black, but he's black, right? I'm giving you guys diversity." So you got to, when you think about diversity, it's not always about skin tone. You have to also think about diversity of thought. All right. Then the next step is Senate confirmation. So there's a Judiciary Committee hearing. The nominee appears before the Senate Judiciary Committee, where they answer questions about their legal qualifications, judicial philosophy, and past rulings. The process often involves a deep examination of their career and public record. So even though you have to have any qualifications, it would help to have some when they start having this point of the conversation. Although we thought we would want a qualified president, we still elected Donald Trump somehow. Then, committee vote. After the hearing, the Judiciary Committee votes on whether to send a nomination to the full Senate with a favorable, unfavorable, or no recommendation. So this is why last week when we were talking about the judicial branch and we talked about all these various committees that your congressmen or senators can serve under, this is why everybody votes counts, because your congressman may serve on that committee and you don't want them blocking the wrong judges or the right judges from that powerful seat, right? And then after that comes the full Senate vote. The full Senate debates the nominee and holds a vote. A simple majority was required for the confirmation. Appointment. Once confirmed by the Senate, the president formally appoints the nominee as a Supreme Court justice, and they are sworn in to begin serving on the court. Qualifications. No constitutional. There is no, once again, constitutional requirement. The U.S. Constitution does not specify any particular qualifications for Supreme Court justices, such as age, education, profession, or citizenship. In fact, a justice does not even need to have a law degree or prior judicial experience. But the historical norm, despite the lack of formal qualifications, all justices in modern times have been lawyers. Most have had significant experience as either judges, legal scholars, or prominent attorneys before their appointment. Right? So think about someone like Ben Crump. That's somebody we can nominate for to be a Supreme Court justice because he has a lot of experience fighting for civil rights as an attorney. Good example. And then also keep in mind, once again, this is a lifetime appointment. Once appointed, Supreme Court justices serve for life unless they retire, resign, or are impeached and removed from office. This lifetime tenure is designed to insulate them from political pressure. Once again, the thought process is by them having a lifetime appointment, they'll be insulated from political pressures. The same reason why our senators have 6 years to run because of the vastness of their responsibilities. We want them not so much to be focused on how do I make people happy, but how they do their job correctly. Congressmen are always kissing babies, shaking hands because they're being they're having to run for re-election every 2 years. So the idea is that, well, if the Supreme Court justices are not looking to create any friends or win any popularity contests, then maybe they'll exercise their position with more integrity because they don't have to sell themselves out for a vote. You follow me? This is the rationale as to why we do that. Some people say, we need to change that. Just keep in mind, there's nothing wrong with saying you need to change it, but this is why you're changing it. This is what you're changing it from. So you better have a good reason as to what you're going to change it to and why. There's something to think about there, right? That's all. Now, I don't have a problem with saying maybe just a 10-year serving, maybe a 12-year serving. So that way we can kind of keep things moving because I think some thought processes become antiquated at times. So should it be a lifetime appointment? I don't think so. But I think it should be a longer appointment to help them better insulate themselves, right? I think it should be a one-time 12-year serving. After your 12 years, you can't even be nominated again for Supreme Court justice. I think that's how we should do it. That keeps you from having to expand the Supreme Court. We could keep it at 9 justices, but then we know every 12 years we're cycling somebody out. I think that's what we should do. That's my suggestion. Let me know what your thoughts are about that. But that's what I think we should do. Now, the judicial branch of the U.S. government is responsible for interpreting laws, resolving legal disputes, ensuring justice under the Constitution. It operates independently from the executive and legislative branches and is structured across several levels. Here's a breakdown of its components. We just talked about this earlier. I'm going to go in a little bit deeper. So, one, we have the Supreme Court, the role, highest court in the United States, tasked with reviewing and interpreting constitutional issues, federal laws, and disputes between states. Composition consists of 9 justices, including 1 chief justice and 8 associate justices, all appointed for life. Jurisdiction, it has both original jurisdiction in specific cases like disputes between states, and the appellate jurisdiction, reviewing decisions made by lower courts. Right. So when they pass a law, let's say at the state level, they can review that and say, let's say at the state level, they say, um, well, this is what's going on right now with abortion. They can say at the state level, oh, we something that doesn't happen now. We're going to start doing abortions up to 36 weeks. That doesn't happen. They stop at 24 weeks. So let's say one state says we're going to do that. They can then rule and say no, that's unconstitutional to do that for XYZ reason. We don't support it, right? Or in the issue of Trump and this whole immunity thing, they can look at that and say, yeah, we have to review that law. So that's part of how that works. The power of judicial review, the Supreme Court can declare laws or executive actions unconstitutional, a key function established by the case of Marbury versus Madison in 1803. Right? Then next we have the Federal Court of Appeals, circuit courts, right? Keep in mind, these people are also appointed by the president. Role, intermediate appellate courts that review decisions from lower district courts. They primarily handle appeals and ensure that consistent applications of the law across the U.S. Composition, there are 13 courts, each covering a group of states or specialized subject matter, such as the federal circuit. Appellate jurisdiction, these courts do not conduct trials, but rather review the application of a law in cases heard by lower courts. Federal district courts. Role. These are the trial courts of the federal system where most federal cases begin. They handle both civil and criminal cases under federal law, i.e., Diddy, right? Composition. There are 94 district courts across the U.S. with judges appointed for life by the president and confirmed by the Senate. So they're not the only people appointed for life, unlike the U.S. Supreme Court. These 94 district courts with their judges are also appointed by life, and they're nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Okay? President Trump nominated a whole bunch of judges during this term. So when you guys are trying to figure out when I'm fighting these big cases and like why my state can't get this changed and that changed, sometimes it's not just about the congressman you elected or the senator, right? Or the president. It is about that, because then they may get a judge in there that is the thorn in your side, right? Jurisdiction. District courts have original jurisdiction over cases involving federal statutes, constitutional questions, or disputes between citizens of different states when large sums of money are involved. So if you're suing someone, you live in Kentucky, you're suing someone that lives in Missouri, then at some point, federal courts get involved. Specialized federal courts. Their role, some courts are set up to handle specific types of cases, often involving particular areas of the law or specialized jurisdiction. Examples include U.S. Tax Court, handles disputes between taxpayers and the IRS. U.S. Court of International Trade, deals with cases involving international trade and customs laws. U.S. Court of Federal Claims, hear claims for money damages against the U.S. government. So if you're suing the U.S. government, or sometimes you have people that lobby within the VA, and they'll get lawyers to sue the U.S. government to say, hey, this soldier was hurt, or these group of soldiers was hurt in battle. And then a lot of times what happens, what you'll see is sometimes laws get passed that then now serve as like Agent Orange and all these different things. It's deep, y'all. It's bigger than Nino Brown. State courts role. While technically part of the state governments, State courts operate in parallel with federal courts and handle the vast majority of legal cases, including civil disputes, family law, criminal cases that do not involve federal issues. So if it happened at the state level, that's your state courts. We're going to talk more about state powers next week. Well, not next week, but the week when we come back from that. All right. We'll talk about the governor and all that good stuff. Um, Structure. State court system typically includes the state supreme courts, the highest court in the state, intermediate appellate courts, similar to the federal appeals courts, trial courts handle most cases within the state court system. So you get caught speeding, you get a ticket, child support within your state. And there you go. All right, administrative courts. Role. These courts deal with specific areas of administrative law, often involve disputes between individuals or entities and government agencies. Right? Example: Social Security Administration appeals, immigration courts, labor dispute tribunals. Magistrate judges. Another role. They assist district court judges by handling some of the pretrial matters and minor cases. They do not serve life terms and typically have limited jurisdiction. Key powers of the judicial branch: judicial review, the ability to review and invalidate laws or execute actions that conflict with the Constitution. So, once again, we talked about just 2 weeks ago, we talked about the matters of the president, right? We talked about executive law. When people talk about, oh, I'm supposed to put an executive order out. You can't put an executive order out that says, we're going to strip all black people of being able to read newspapers because, first of all, black people have full rights, and now you're taking away our, freedom of speech, right? So then that should be in some type of conflict with the Constitution. So therefore, that law won't be supported or actually properly executed because then the Supreme Court can say, it's not even legal, buddy. That doesn't even follow the Constitution. What are you doing? Right? Then you have interpretation of the laws. Judges interpret the meaning and application of federal laws in the Constitution, enforcement of rights. The courts protect individual rights by interpreting and applying constitutional protections. Didn't do a good job with Roe v. Wade, but hey, that's what they're supposed to do, right? Now, the process of selecting judges varies by court level, but in general, the selection process reflects specific function and structure of each court. Below is a breakdown of how judges are selected for different types of courts and qualifications they're typically required. So let's go through these. Some circuit courts, the U.S. Court of Appeals. The selection process: judges from the 13 U.S. Court of Appeals are nominated by the president and must be confirmed by the Senate. After confirmation, they are appointed to serve a lifetime terms unless they resign, retire, or are impeached. Qualifications: there are no formal constitutional requirements for appellate judges, but typically they have the following: extensive legal experience, often having served as federal district court judges, state judges, or practicing attorneys, are often selected based on their legal expertise, judicial philosophy, and political alignment with the president. So there's going to be some bias there on who the president says, I think I want them as a judge. They typically have a law degree, though it is not a formal constitutional requirement. Federal district court selection process: like circuit court judges, district court judges are nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. They are appointed for lifetime terms. Qualifications: as with circuit court judges, there are no constitutional requirement, but typically qualifications include significant legal experience, often as lawyers or lower court judges, expertise in the law, strong legal credentials, and sometimes political considerations, a law degree, and expertise in litigation or judicial roles. Specialized federal courts. These courts deal with specific areas. Let me drink something real quick. Me. All right, let's see if we do better. All right. Specialized federal courts. These courts deal with specific areas of the law, such as tax, trade, and patent law. Judges in these courts are often selected for their expertise in particular fields. U.S. Tax Court, Court of International Trade, Court of Federal Claims, etc. The selection process: judges in specialized federal courts are nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. They are often appointed for fixed terms, 15 years for tax court judges, rather than lifetime terms. So I wasn't too far off the mark when I said I think they should do 12 years. 15 years would be terribly too long, right? But somebody who's been a Supreme Court justice or a judge shouldn't be a judge who came in the 1960s. You might have some messed up ideas about black people, right? maybe somebody who could at least grow with the times a little bit better might work better for us. That's my suggestion. Qualifications: judges for specialized courts typically have significant experience or expertise in the field relevant to their court, tax law, international trade, or patent law. They often have advanced legal credentials, specialized knowledge in the court's jurisdiction. State courts: the selection process for judges varies significantly from state to state, and different states may use different methods for selecting judges. Selection methods: elections. Some states elect their judges through partisan or nonpartisan elections, i.e., we do elections here in Maryland. Appointment: in other states, judges may be appointed by a governor or a legislative body. Merit selection: the Missouri plan specifically. Some states use a hybrid method in which a judicial nominating commission provides a list of candidates to the governor, who then select a judge. The judge later faces a retention election where voters decide if the judge should remain in office. Right? Qualifications vary by state, but generally include a law degree, being licensed to practice law in that state, a certain number of years of legal experience, often in the range of 5 to 10 years. Also, residency in the state or jurisdiction where the judge will serve. Administrative courts: these courts handle disputes involving government agencies such as Social Security claims or immigration cases. Selection process: administrative law judges (ALJs) are typically appointed by federal agencies through a competitive process. ALJs are selected based on merit, usually after passing a civil service examination and undergoing a vetting process by the Office of Personnel Management, OPM. Qualifications: ALJs are generally required to have a law degree and be licensed to practice law, significant legal experience, often at least 7 years in relevant areas such as administrative law or regulatory law. They are subject to ongoing performance reviews to maintain impartiality and independence. Very different from these people that get nominated, right? Very. Magistrate judges. Magistrate judges assist district court judges by handling various pretrial matters and minor cases in federal district courts. Selection process. Magistrate judges are appointed by the district court judges in the jurisdiction where they serve. They are not confirmed by Senate and typically serve 8-year renewable terms. Qualifications: magistrate judges must be licensed attorneys with substantial legal experience, often with prior experience as state or federal prosecutors, public defenders, or private attorneys. Meet the professional qualifications established by the Judicial Conference of the United States, which generally requires several years of legal experience. So, just a little quick summary, right? Circuit court, circuit, circuit, federal district, and specialized federal courts. Judges are nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. They usually have extensive legal experience, a law degree, and often political alignment with the president's ideology. State courts: selection methods may vary by state. Election, appointment, or merit selection with qualifications, generally including a law degree and 7 years of legal experience. Administrative courts: judges are selected through a competitive merit-based process requiring a legal experience and civil service qualifications. Magistrate judges appointed by the district court judges, they must be experienced attorneys, often serve limited and renewable terms. All right. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court has decided many landmark cases through its history, shaping American law and civil rights. Significant. Sorry, let me reread that. The U.S. Supreme Court has decided many landmark cases through its history, shaping the American law, civil rights, and government structure. Here are some key cases organized on these various issues. So let's go over a couple of these because a lot of people be like, "Well, I don't really care about that," and this was the part of class I slept through in school. I get it, but this stuff is important. So let's just talk about how important some of these cases that the Supreme Court has gone over. We talked about the Supreme Court earlier, but I want to break down some of these that we've seen over time. All right, because some of you, from the young folks out there watching, you're going to probably see this on the test one day. Just putting that out there. So, anyways, constitutional interpretation and judicial review. Let's go over a couple of these. Marbury versus Madison, right? Established the principle of judicial review. Decision: the court under Chief Justice John Marshall ruled that it had the power to strike down laws it deemed unconstitutional, establishing the judiciary as independent and equal branch of government. Here's another one: civil rights and equity. Dred Scott versus Sanford in 1857. The issue: whether an enslaved person could sue for their freedom. Decision, the court ruled that African Americans, whether free or enslaved, could not be American citizens and thus had no standing to sue in federal court. The decision fueled tensions leading to the Civil War and was later overturned by the 14th Amendment. Black people, this is one that you should know. Okay? Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896. The issue was constitutionality of racial segregation under separate but equal doctrine. Decision, the court upheld racial segregation laws, stating that separate but equal facilities for African Americans did not violate the Constitution. The decision was eventually overturned by Brown versus Board of Education. Next one, let's talk about that one. Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. The issue, racial segregation in public schools. Decision, the court unanimously ruled that racial segregation in public school was unconstitutional, declaring that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal and overturning Plessy versus Ferguson. This is another reason why I said I think justices should only serve a limited amount of time. Plessy versus Ferguson to Brown versus Board of Education, that's only about a 58-year difference, 1896 to 1954, right? So I think this is why changing who sits on these various courts closer to every 10 to 15 years, I think would serve us better as United States, right? So that way, as we become more aware of things, we can say, yeah, we're moving forward. Let's make sure our lives are moving forward with the courts, right? Sometimes people don't like change, but something changes and it is inevitable, right? If we're going to grow as a people. Next big one, Loving versus Virginia. This is why they say Virginia is for lovers. This is where this comes from. The issue, constitutionality of laws banning interracial marriage, right? Decision, the court ruled that laws prohibiting interracial marriage were unconstitutional, striking down Virginia's anti-miscegenation law and similar laws across the country as violations of the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. So if you want to bunny hop legally, you can bunny hop. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can bunny hop if you want to legally. But you will be executed in the court of Dr. Umar Johnson. You're going to get several lashes from bunny hopping. So put that out there. Legally under the U.S. Constitution, you can bunny hop. But Dr. Umar, I don't know. He going to find you guilty. You might lose your black card. All right. So then we have rights of the accused in criminal procedure. So we have Miranda versus Arizona, 1966. Your Miranda rights. Here we go. Issue, rights of individuals in police custody. Decision, the court held that suspects must be informed of their rights to remain silent and to have an attorney, the Miranda rights, before police questioning, strengthening protections against self-incrimination, ensuring fair treatment under the Fifth Amendment. That's why you can say, I plead the Fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, Fifth, right? The Fifth Amendment, your Miranda rights. So there you go. That's its origination. You have Gideon versus Wainwright, 1963. The issue, right to legal counsel for criminal defendants. Decision, the court ruled that states must provide an attorney to defendants in criminal cases who cannot afford one, ensuring the right to legal counsel under the Sixth Amendment, right? Freedom of speech and expression. Schenck versus the United States, 1919. Issue, limits on free speech during wartime. Decision, the court upheld the conviction of Charles Schenck for distributing anti-draft pamphlets, ruling that the speech could be restricted if posted a clear and present danger to national security. This case established the clear and present danger test. Then we have Tinker versus Des Moines Independent Community School District in 1969. Issue, free speech rights of students. Decision, the court ruled that students do not shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech of expression at the schoolhouse gate. The court upheld that rights of students to wear black armbands in protest of Vietnam, right? Now, privacy and reproduction rights. This is a big one. These few I'm about to go over because we're dealing with that right now. Griswold versus Connecticut in 1965. Issue, rights to privacy regarding contraceptive use. Decision, the court struck down a Connecticut law banning the use of contraceptives by married couples, ruling that the Constitution implicitly guarantees a right to privacy, laying the groundwork for future decisions on reproductive rights. Then Just literally 8 years later, we get Roe v. Wade issue, a woman's right to choose an abortion decision. The court ruled that a woman's right to have an abortion was protected by the constitutional right to privacy, striking down many state laws that restricted abortion access. The decision was later overturned by Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health Organization in 2022. So let's get into that. Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization in 2022 issue constitutionality of abortion rights decision. The court overturned Roe v. Wade, ruling that the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion and returning the authority to regulate abortion to the states. Amazing how things can happen. And that's weird because that's a time where we're looking at the laws like, man, that went backwards. It did. It really did. Let's talk about executive powers and national security. United States versus Nixon, 1974, issue. Presidential privilege and accountability decision. The court ruled that President Nixon could not use executive privilege to withhold evidence, tape recordings relevant to the Watergate scandal, affirming that no one, including the president, is above the law. We're dealing with that right now with Trump. Nobody should be immune while acting as the president, especially because they're typically protecting their own hide. Let's put that out there. Kawamatsu versus United States in 1944, the issue. Internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. Decision, the court controversially upheld the internment of Japanese Americans as a wartime necessity, though the decision has been widely criticized and repudiated over time. In 2018, the Supreme Court stated that Korematsu was wrongly decided. Federalism and state powers. McCullough versus Maryland. Issue, federal versus state power, specifically regarding the creation of a national bank. Decision, the court ruled that Congress had the authority to create a national bank and that states could not tax federal institutions, reinforcing the principle of federal supremacy over state laws. Gibbons versus Ogden, 1824, issue, regulation of interstate commerce. Decision, the court ruled that the federal government, not the states, had the authority to regulate interstate commerce under the Commerce Clause, significantly expanding the federal power. Hence, we have a whole committee in Congress. We talked about that last week, where their whole purpose is being on a commerce committee, literally, right? Let's talk about same-sex marriage and LGBTQ rights. Obergefell and Hodges, 2015, issue, same-sex marriage. Decision, the court ruled that same-sex couples had a constitutional right to marry, declaring state bans on same-sex marriage violated the 14th Amendment Equal Protection and Due Process Clause, right? Then we have Lawrence versus Texas in 2003, issue, criminalization of same-sex activity. Decision, the court struck down sodomy laws in Texas, ruling that consenting adults have a right to privacy in their intimate relationships, overturning Bowers versus Harvard in 1986. Religious freedom, Ingalls versus Vitale, 1962, the issue, school prayer. Decision, the court ruled that it was unconstitutional for state officials to compose an official school prayer and encourage its citation in public schools, as it violated the establishment clause of the First Amendment. Burwell versus Hobby Lobby stores in 2014, issue, religious freedom and corporate rights. Decision, the court held the closely held for-profit corporations could deny coverage of contraceptives to employees if doing so violated the owner's religious belief, citing that Religious Freedom Restoration Act, RFRA. All right. So when we talk about some of these things that our judicial branch can do, they're very powerful, right? Let's just talk a little bit about some of the things they can do. So, like, once again, you have judicial review. An example of checking the legislative branch would be Marbury versus Madison, 1803. The Supreme Court established that the principle of judicial review, which allows courts to overturn unconstitutional laws. For example, Brown versus Board of Education. In 1954, the court ruled that the state law establishing racial segregation in public schools was unconstitutional. Another example of checking the executive branch, the Nixon case in 1974. When we look at the interpretation of laws, it could be something like the courts often interpret vague or ambiguous legislation, which can limit how Congress laws are applied. For instance, in Gibbons versus Ogden in 1824, the court interpreted the scope of Congress powers under the Commerce Clause, reinforcing the federal government's power over states in regulation and balancing interstate commerce, right? protection of individual rights. That could be, once again, you can see that in Miranda versus Arizona, or in Obergefell versus Hodges, or even Roe v. Wade, right? But there are limitations of power for the judicial branch, right? So while the courts have significant authority through judicial review, their powers are limited to ensure balance. The judicial branch cannot make laws, legislative power, or enforce them, executive power. It can only interpret laws and rule on their constitutionality. Congress can pass new laws. The executive branch enforces court decisions. Checks on judicial power. The appointment of judges. The president nominates federal judges and the Supreme Court justices, while the Senate must confirm them. This allows the executive and legislative branches to influence the makeup of our judiciary system. Impeachment of judges. Congress has the power to impeach and remove federal judges, including Supreme Court justices, for misconduct or abuse of power. This acts as a check on judicial behavior. Amendments to the Constitution. If the courts interpret a Constitution provision in a way that Congress or public disagrees with, the Constitution can be amended to override the court's decision. For example, the 11th Amendment was passed to overturn a Supreme Court decision, Chisholm versus Georgia. So that's why electing the right people can help, because therefore they can overturn through legal Roe v. Wade, right? So I hope this was helpful for you guys understanding the judicial branch. I mean, it's one of our more, I think you would say, common sense branches, but understanding the various complexities of these various courts, I think, helps us understand the strategy of when we're looking at a president. So when they say they feel this way about this law, that law, then that might give you some understanding about what judges they're probably going to appoint. And if they get a chance to appoint a Supreme Court justice, they're probably going to get somebody that follows their views, right? So we need to understand our government, because so often people say we need to change this, we need to change that, but you don't understand the mechanism of change within your system, and then you're disappointed with the results. You can only be mad at yourself. So I hope this information we're going over is helpful, because it will really help shape the way we do things, going forward. So let's get some jam music. Yeah. All right, let's party to that, baby. So anyways, I got some shout outs. So let's go through that real quick. Happy birthday to my sister-in-law, Marcia Hawkins. Happy birthday to my cousin, Juanita Scott. Shout out to Shaw Daku. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to Reverend Hilda Hudson. Happy birthday to Matt Robertson. Happy birthday to Bertram Bridgewater. Happy birthday, Kenny Elam. Let's see, the tent man. Happy birthday to my man, Jonathan Travers. Happy birthday to Robert Major. Happy birthday to Diane Dabney. Happy heavenly birthday to my cousin, Michelle Thompson. We missed you, boo. Anyways, we got anniversary and weddings. Shout out to Joe Thompson and his wife, 25 years of marriage. Shout out to Justin and Kashana Roller. Shout out to Kim and Nicole Howard. We love marriage here on the Nitty Gritty Show. Actually, let me do some football scores real quick. Let me see who got their butt beat. Let me see who did their thing real quick. I got the scores right here. So, yeah. Shout out to the Jets. They won, obviously. The Giants beat the Browns. The Eagles, they won their game. Shout out to the Vikings. Shout out to the Broncos. Shout out to the Packers. Shout out to the Colts. Shout out to the Steelers. Shout out to the Seahawks. The Panthers. Shout out to the Rams. Shout out to the Lions. And the Ravens, they got their game. They beat the Cowboys. I can get behind that. I know you happy, Richard. And then going on right now, we have the Chiefs and Falcons. I like to see the Chiefs get upset. That's just how I feel. And then tomorrow, HTTC, baby. The Commanders, we're going to beat the brakes off the Bengals. You best believe that. And the Jaguars and Bills have their game as well. Look, thank you guys for watching the Nitty Gritty Show. It's your boy, JD Costa. Katrina was with me here in spirit. She was downstairs with baby Zuri. I will be back on, let me tell y'all real quick. I will be back on, oh, sorry. I had my calendar in a different month because I had some things going on. We'll be back on the 6th. We got something special going on next Sunday. So can't do a show on September 29th, but we'll be back on October 6th. And we'll be talking about local powers and how those government agencies work and those various facets. and we'll go from there. We're gonna keep the ball rolling. Thank you guys for watching, and we out of here, y'all. Peace and a bottle of hair grease. It's all good.